This is lecture 66A in the series The ABCs of Bolshevism here on YouTube, on the ABCs of Communism channel. I want to say a few things before we get to South Asia, which is our primary topic this morning. And the first of them is that this year's ABCs of Communism Bolshevism 2018 Volume 1 is now available at Kindle Books, and we have 3 more volumes. The organic text is what I like to call Volume 1, and that's about 909 pages now, and it goes up through the last 4 administrations of the Chinese Communist Party leadership. And there are 3 volumes of proofs. Volume 2 is Communism in Latin America, Volume 3 is Communism in East Asia, and Volume 4 is Communism in Oceania. Now, the reason that I say proofs is that you may recall that what I have started from lecture number 1 talking to you about is the fact that there are universal global stages of sociocultural evolution. In Karl Marx's time, he was able to identify primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, and capitalism, and of course predicted the onset of communism. In the years that have passed since that, in the last 150 years, we have in archaeology been able to put in a great deal more detail, and that of course is a completely correct sequence, but we've been able to add to it. And furthermore, as I said in the first lecture of this series, this is a universal series of sociocultural stage evolution, and so you have it in all parts of the world. It doesn't matter whether it's landlocked countries like China, Asia, Mesopotamia and Egypt, or Peru and the high Andes, that is, and Mesoamerica, or whether it's in Oceania. You're going to have exactly the same stages. You just have to know what you're looking for. And so I have outlined for Latin America, East Asia, and Oceania those stages in the next 3 volumes. So this year's edition has actually 4 volumes to it. The second thing I want to mention is that 2018 opens on a new and better note than the international working class movement has witnessed in many years. The first most important moment was in 1903 when the Bolsheviks were split out of the social democratic milieu by Vladimir Lenin. And the second was 1934 when Stalin launched gave the general report to the Congress of Victors. And last year, that is 2017, we had the 19th Congress of the Communist Party of China, which essentially accepts the general sociocultural evolutionary outline that you have in your textbook, which of course made me happy. And they've added some more to it in terms of subphases and so on. But by 2050, the Chinese Party will be able to begin the construction of the communist stage. From my perspective, it appears as if the basic outline of sociocultural evolutionary stage progression I have presented herein is essentially in the correct. Now, and finally, the leadership of the Cuban Revolution will pass to Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez in the spring of this year. Accordingly, the hopes of the imperialists that the exit of the last of the Castro brothers will herald a new opportunity for reintroducing capitalism in Cuba has been dashed. So those are 3 things I think you want to keep in mind. Now, on the 16th of this month, which is just a couple of days ago, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing announced what it considered to be its 6 most important 2017 archaeological discoveries in China. Chen Xingkan, director of the Institute of Archaeology, said, "The most valuable part of archaeology lies in the information on human activity unraveled from the ruins." And the 6 findings that he lists contain information on human activity over a time span of the last 45,000 years. Now, of course, we know that China has been the subject of occupation for nearly 2 million years. We're going to talk about that more later as we get into South Asia, because on their way there, people passed through India and Pakistan, of course, and now we have dates of around 2 million years there. But at any rate, the first of these Chinese 6 sites that Professor Chen thinks are that most important come from a cave at the crossroads of China called Xinjiang Uyghur Cave. This is in Central Asia. On the crossroads of China from Central Asia and Europe, archaeologists found a stratigraphic cave sequence dating from 45,000 years ago to 3,500 years ago, and it's the first Paleolithic cave site found in the northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And it consists of one oval stone scraper tool recovered that exhibits the manufacturing method, which is, as I've learned from my own personal experience, if you can reconstruct the manufacturing method, it's far more than better than just being able to show a typological similarity. The tool has a sharp edge. Its typological similarity to stone tools of Western Eurasia means it could help decode cultural exchange between both ends of Eurasia and help understand the migration of our human ancestors. Now, the second was an ATC, that is an early theocratic chiefdom, and that transformed into an early kingdom in Shandong, East China, where surface structures and half-crypt buildings, defensive walls and trenches, and jade artifacts were found in a prehistoric settlement from 5,000 to 4,600 years ago in today's Shandong province of eastern China, where archaeologists also found pottery and jade vessels in the tombs, which were used in sacrifice ceremonies and banquets. These burial goods proved the emergence of a ruling rank cum class, as commoners were buried unceremoniously. This is a late Neolithic site, and it shows the accelerating polarization of the rich and the poor, and the yawning gap among people of different social status. Thirdly, we have sites with more early rice. Archaeologists found carbonized rice and millet in a middle and late Neolithic site that date back to 5,800 and 4,300 years ago in today's East China Fujian province. And these finds complete the domestication sequence established for rice in China that began 10,000 years earlier. And we've discussed this in earlier lectures, especially the work of Richard S. McNeish over there. Now, the relics also filled in archaeological gaps in the northwestern part of Fujian between the Middle and Late Neolithic era and the early dynasties, including the Shang from 1300 BC to 1046 BC and the Zhou 1046 BC to 771 BC. And fourthly, we have bronze vessel production, now known from the Zeng, Z-E-N-G kingdom. Over a half century ago, nearly 100 pieces of bronze vessels were unearthed in Jingshan County in central China's Hubei province, leading to the discovery of an unrecorded ancient kingdom we now call the Zeng, Z-E-N-G. Now, that dates back to about 2,700 years ago. For example, last year a bronze pot was uncovered, and this proved that bronze was transported from the south to the capital of the Zhou dynasty in the north. Archaeologists in China believe that the large scale of bronze relics found in the remains indicates that the Zeng kingdom was most probably in charge of the smelting, production, and transportation of bronze utensils of the Zhou dynastic empire. And then we come to the Rong and Dai, that is R-O-N-G, and the people called Dai, D-I, and their origin. A wagon team consisting of 5 chariots and 16 horses was excavated last year from a horse and chariot pit in Qingtang County, Hebei province. This discovery reveals that the Rong and Dai major ethnic groups had emerged on what is now Chinese territory by 770 to 200 BC. That is from the late spring and autumn period, that is 770 to 476 BC, to the mid-Warring States period, 475 to 221 BC, which is the date for the final unification of nuclear China, as you may recall. The site area includes caves where the heads and hooves of a large number of cattle, sheep, and horses were buried in different layers. Bronze utensils and pottery that originated from the Central Plains, where the Washia ethnic group stemmed from, were also found in the ruins, indicating the integration of the Washia culture with the culture of the Rong and Dai. And finally, number 6, we have the Jin Kingdom Royal Temple. The ruins of the ancient town of Baoma on a hill in Antu County, northeast China's Jilin province, were excavated. One structure was shown by a jade book discovered therein to be the site of a temple used by the royal family of the Jin dynasty from AD 1115 to 1234, and for the worship at Mount Cambay. The ruins of Bioma town are among the best preserved and the most important architectural remains of the Jin dynasty. So this brings us to the subject of this morning's lecture proper, which is India and primitive communism in South Asia. I want to just make a couple of comments about the geology. The Indian craton was once part of the supercontinent of Pangaea. Now, at that time, you may recall that what is now India's southwest coast was attached to Madagascar and southern Africa, and what is now its east coast was attached to Australia. During the Jurassic period, about 160 million years ago, rifting caused Pangaea to break apart into two supercontinents, Gondwana to the south and Laurasia to the north. The Indian craton remained attached to Gondwana until the supercontinent itself began to rift apart about the early Cretaceous, 125 million years ago. The Indian plate then drifted northward toward the Eurasian plate at a pace that is the fastest known movement of any plate, and it is generally believed that the Indian plate separated from Madagascar about 90 million years ago. However, some biogeographical and geological evidence suggests that the connection between Madagascar and Africa was retained at the time when the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate about 50 million years ago. Now, this orogeny, which is continuing today, is related to closure of the Tethys Ocean. The closure of this ocean that created the Alps in Europe and the Caucasus Range in Western Asia created at the same time the Himalaya Mountains and the Tibetan Plateau in South Asia. The current orogenic event is causing part of the Asian continent to deform westward and eastward on either side of the orogeny. Concurrently with this collision, the Indian plate sutured onto the adjacent Australian plate, forming a new larger plate, the Indo-Australian plate. Now let's move on to humans. Homo, the genus Homo in India. It was announced in New Delhi on the 24th of March 2011 that archaeologists had discovered India's oldest Stone Age tools dated to 1.5 million years ago at a prehistoric site near Chennai. Chennai is the capital of the Indian state of Tamil Nadu, located on the Coromandel coast off the Bay of Bengal. That's southern India. The stone tool discovered is so far the earliest date on the arrival of the human primitive communists from Africa into India. Therefore, we know humans reached South India more than 1 million years ago and were of the middle or erectus grade of Homo. In the next chapter, we shall see that at Rawat in North Pakistan, which is near Islamabad, there is an early Homo occupation dating to about 1.9 million years ago. For now, my point is that we can see a route of eastward movement taking our Homo erectus ancestors across the base of the Himalayan uplift toward China. Therefore, it is not surprising that the entire South Asian continent of India was occupied by 1.5 million years ago. Researchers led by Shanti Papu of the Sharma Center for Heritage Education in Tamil Nadu discovered more than 3,500 quartzite tools of the distinct Acheulean design used by the earliest humans in Africa 2 million years ago. The Indian tools are dated to at least 1.07 million years, and some are possibly as old as 1.51 million years. The researchers report in all of this in the journal Science. Now, that is almost contemporary with similar tools found in Africa, the researchers note in their paper. And a gentleman, archaeologist named Michael Petraglia at the University of Oxford in England said, quote, "If the early age of 1.5 billion years ago is to be believed, this has major implications. The early date would be consistent with the age of early populations of Homo erectus, and it means that a just-forming hominid brain was able to cross formidable barriers and adapt to the ecological settings of India." Robin Dinnell of Sheffield University in England said, "The new evidence suggests The spread of this type of tool from Africa occurred in two phases, in that person's opinion, by Homo erectus into South Asia, first of all, and then later by what he calls Homo heidelbergensis, northward and westward into Europe. I'm not going to bother commenting on this because, as you know, we're using a threefold interpretation of Homo evolution. The first grade being Australopithecine, the second erectus, and everything after 1 million years ago is sapiens. Now, the discovery at a site called Harappan in the Kartalyar River Basin helps anthropologists better understand the spread of ancient people from Africa into Asia, and this find is unprecedented for archaeological studies in India, said Petraglia. Now we have 1.4 million years ago date on a site in Levant, the 1.9 million year ago date in Rewat, and the 1.5 million year ago date from South India. He says that means that soon after humans invented the Acheulean toolkit, groups migrated out of Africa at an early stage, crossing formidable geographical barriers to get to southern Asia. The suggestion that this occurred at around 1.5 million years ago is simply staggering. Petraglia said the main issue here is one of confidence in the dating methods, but as the researchers used two independent dating techniques, he said, "I am satisfied that the ages are accurate." The earliest date for the Indian find also helps explain similar tools found in the Bose Basin of South China, which we discussed in last year's lectures and dated about 800,000 years ago, Canel added. While the tools could have been developed independently in China, the findings of older artifacts in India now shows it was possible for the technology of spread there from India. Acheulean tools originated in Africa by 2 million years ago and then spread throughout Eurasia. The exact chronology of this spread, however, has been a long-standing puzzle, so knowing how the old oval and pear-shaped hand axes, cleavers, and other artifacts will help archaeologists understand early human migration into South Asia and the Indonesian archipelago. These artifacts were discovered in one of the richest Paleolithic sites in Tamil Nadu state of India called Harappan, nestled in the Kartalyar River Basin. The site was discovered as early as 1863 by British geologist Robert Bruce Foote and has been excavated off and on since then. Shanti Papu and colleagues determined the ages of these tools, which suggests that Acheulean tool-making humans were present in South Asia around 1 million years ago, if not earlier, existing at the same time as other populations in Southwest Asia and Africa. The team discovered more than 3,500 quartzite stone artifacts, including more than 70 Acheulean hand axes, cleavers, and flakes. By taking paleomagnetic measurements, the researchers were able to directly date the sediments that covered the Acheulean tools. All paleomagnetic measurements from around the site showed a reverse polarity, meaning that the sediment predates the period after the last reversal of Earth's magnetic field, and the discovery of reverse polarity establishes the fact that these sediments are more than 1 million years old. To obtain even more precise age of the artifacts, the researchers applied a burial dating technique that measures isotopes of two earth metals, aluminum and beryllium, and the findings hint that early humans with distinctive tools migrated throughout Eurasia over 1 million years ago. So for those of you that might be interested, there's a 2011 Science magazine article on early Pleistocene presence of Acheulean hominids in South Asia that I would recommend. For decades, archaeologists have argued about the origins of the mysterious Harappan or Indus Valley civilization. This is a much later period of time that flourished across what is now Pakistan and northwest India from about 5,000 years ago. It was obvious to me, even as an undergraduate, that the preceding phases leading to urban life along the Indus Valley rivers had to have taken place in the nearby mountains of Baluchistan. However, the intense involvement of the U.S. military in that region, not to mention the CIA, prevented me from turning my attention to that earliest site of agricultural Neolithic revolution relevant to the Indus. Now, findings by Indian scientists working in the Gulf of Cambay demonstrate that the Harappans were descended from an advanced mother culture. That culture reached a peak of broad-spectrum wild resource exploitation alongside plant and animal domestication by the end of the last ice age. Rising sea levels inundated some of the territory between the mountain caves of Baluchistan and their rock shelters, also leading to the urban sites where history proper begins, that is, a written record of the evolution of society. A recent report by B. Edwin Aryan, chief geologist with the scientific team from the National Institute of Ocean Technology, NIOT or NIOT, responsible for the underwater surveys in the Gulf of Cambay, outlines the periodization. And in your chapter, which is chapter 70, I believe, of volume 5, when volume 5 comes out, you will read, I attached the entire report of Dr. Edwin Aryan. It was generally believed that a well-organized civilization, he says, could not have existed prior to 5500 BP. Many were reluctant to accept that the flood myths mentioned in many ancient religious writings held some grains of truth. The recent discovery made in this Gulf of Cambay, India site shocked many and made some sit up and watch with interest. It clearly established the existence of an ancient civilization that was submerged in the sea. The methodologies adopted to study this find were novel and different, wherein advanced marine technologies and the most modern scientific applications of various disciplines were put to use. The traditional but conservative archaeologists found it hard to accept that a major discovery could have been made by hitherto unapplied, unheard of techniques. Some observed and understood the importance of the discovery and came out in open support. Initially, when the side-scan sonar images of the underwater structures were shown, some called it a magic of computer software. When hundreds of artifacts were collected and shown, they opined that the ancient river could have transported it. Again, detailed scientific studies were undertaken to prove that the artifacts are in situ. The criticism has driven us to adopt the most modern technologies and scientific methodologies available in the world, which have completely substantiated our findings, and the results have been published as research papers in reputed international journals. Now, several authors are quoting the Gulf of Cambay work as a standard and a benchmark methodology for modern marine archaeological surveys and investigations. The discovery has clearly established the possibility of ancient civilizations that were submerged due to flooding by rising seawaters after the last ice age. The oldest civilization of city-states is thought to be in Mesopotamia, datable to 5,500 years BP, he says. Now, I'll just throw in a comment there that we have the same thing in China at the same date. But at any rate, an extensive, hitherto oldest mature civilization occurs in the northwestern part of India, adjoining Pakistan and Afghanistan. This is the well-known Harappan Civilization that lasted between 5,300 and 2,800 years BP, before present. Before present now is defined as 2000. When I started in archaeology, it was defined as 1950. But at any rate, this is the well-known Harappan Civilization that I just mentioned that. This includes major ruined cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and villages, craft centers, campsites, river stations, fortified places, ports, and so forth that were associated with these cities. The cities had well-lined streets arranged in straight lines with proper drainage and sanitary arrangements and excellent water conveying systems, including check dams for storing water. Usage of a variety of artifacts, metallic objects, many types of pottery, construction of huge structures could not have happened overnight. So obviously there was a major missing link between the ancient hunter-gatherer group of people and the Harappan civilization. In India, there were many Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic Stone Age cultures, but none of them have any remote resemblance to the type of civilization found in the Harappan sites. So it was possible that the missing link between the two was under cover of ice or submerged under some kind of sea level rise caused by the melting of ice sheets. It is a well-established fact that during the last glacial maximum, or ice age, the seas all over the world had shrunk, and the sea level around 18,000 years BP was about 130 meters below the present-day sea level, or about 400 feet lower than it is now. So it is logical to look for such submerged civilization near areas surrounding the present-day Indian coastal areas, especially along what I call the Paleo channel of various rivers. The National Institute of Ocean Technology, NIOT, N-I-O-T, a government of India undertaking, has been carrying out several multidisciplinary marine surveys along the Indian coastal areas for various purposes. During the course of a few geological surveys in Gujarat in the Gulf of Cambay, NIOT came across Paleo river channels in the sea. Now these were seen to be the extension of the present-day major rivers of the area into what is now a submerged part of the coast. In a similar marine survey in a coastal research ship during 1999 to 2000, when this author, Bender, was the chief scientist, several unusual frames of the side-scan sonar images were encountered, and these had square and rectangular features in an arranged geometric fashion which are not expected in the marine domain. Such features are unlikely to be due to natural marine geological processes. Now this made Professor Badarian suspect that human workmanship must have been involved here, and the surveys were followed by him in the following years, and a couple of paleo channels of old rivers were discovered in the middle of the Cambay Bay area under 20 to 40 meters of water at a distance of about 20 kilometers from the present-day coast, which is about 12 miles. The Gulf of Cambay forms a funnel-shaped entrance to the Caribbean Sea, sandwiched between the mainland Gujarat and the Saurashtra Peninsula in the west. This gulf is 135 kilometers long in a north-south direction and more than 100 kilometers or 60 miles wide at its widest part. It is one of the roughest and most complicated seas in the world and covers an area of about 3,000 square kilometers. Several major rivers, including the Narmada, Tapai, Sabarmati, Maha, and Chatranji, drain into it. It has a macro-tidal range of 12 meters, and the currents are up to 8 knots. The sea is often subjected to severe winds, resulting in very rough conditions, and these types of turbulence churn the seabed and produce enormous quantities of silt, making the seawater brownish and turbid, with the result that it is impervious to light rays. The combined effect of these conditions make this part of the country unfit for diving and underwater operations, and operating underwater videography is impossible. Hence, only instruments operating on the principle of sound, like sonar equipment and magnetic equipment, can work here. This includes the side-scan sonar, the SubBottom profiler, and the multi-beam echo-sounder, apart from marine magnetometer. He continues, the term sonar stands for sound navigation and ranging. Sonar is the sensing strategy that measures features of an environment or medium by the way in which that environment transmits or reflects and or absorbs acoustic, that is, sound waves. The seabed is a little understood environment due to its inaccessibility and resistance to large-scale detailed analysis. I might just inject a comment into his discussion here to say that when I was in the oil field, the manager that I worked for, I was his assistant manager, invented a technique for using sound waves to determine where in an oil well a leak was actually, or a blowout, for example, was actually occurring. And if we got to that platform, we flew to quite a few of them, before it was too late, he could use that sound sensing equipment to determine whether we had enough time to get that well under control, or we had to haul ass out of there with the rest of the oil field workers. My point is, sonar, as he had developed it, was for an entirely new purpose. And as this professor has developed it, was for an entirely new purpose also, in this case archaeological. And he says that side-scan sonar uses sound waves to produce images of the seafloor. The hard areas reflect more energy, appear as dark shades, whereas softer areas do not reflect energy as well and are represented by lighter shades. This backscatter is absent behind objects or features that rise above the seafloor and are represented as white shadows in the sonar image. So the dimension of shadows are used to infer the size of the objects. The system used was a digital one, which provides high-resolution sonar images of the seafloor through advanced digital technology in the 100 and 400 kilohertz frequency. The unit is connected to a differential global positioning system, DGPS, for the accurate position of the survey vessel and in turn that of the objects. In these surveys, it was the side-scan sonar that gave excellent results, supported by other systems. Initially, two major paleo channels of rivers were recognized. One was of a length of 9.2 kilometers and another a little over 9.0 kilometers. When these were sampled, it was seen that just below a thin marine sediment cover of a few centimeters, river alluvium and pebbles typical of terrestrial river sediments, below which typical river conglomerates were observed at depth. Such evidence clearly indicated that the area presently under the sea was originally dry land over which rivers were flowing. Due to different factors, these became submerged, and we'll talk about those in a few moments, and they now lie underwater. The sonar images showed regular geometric patterns in one paleo channel over a length of 9 kilometers in the sea and about 20 kilometers west of the Hazira coastal area. Associated with this, on either side of the paleo channel, basement-like features in a grid pattern were observed at a water depth of 20 to 40 meters. These resemble an urban habitation site where the basement, now at the bottom of the sea, are pit-like structures. Another paleo channel over 9.2 kilometers was detected off the Suvali coastal area. Here also similar features were observed, and in general, the basement-like features were located in a linear east-west direction on either side of the paleo channel. It is seen that these features are 5 by 4 meters in size on the eastern side, whereas the westernmost part had dimensions of 16 by 15 meters. Now we want to come to a more precise sociocultural definition of what was happening in this pre-Harappan period. So we go from an advanced theocratic chiefdom to a kingdom, and the habitation sites are indicative of a bureaucracy that laid out a strict grid-like pattern indicating a good sense of town planning. There was evidence of water conducting channels. In short, what we have is a professionally overseen, properly planned township exhibiting a high level of knowledge and practice by the ATC and then kingdom administrators. The area in general is covered by sand waves that occur above the seabed. Often these cover the dwellings, but even then the shapes could be discerned. So, apart from the regular sites of habitation, the side-scan sonar picked up images of several big structures. There is a rectangular, 41 by 25 meter shaped depression wherein one can see steps gradually going down to reach a depth of about 7 meters. Surrounding the depression there is a wall-like projection on all sides. One could observe an inlet and outlet and a separate enclosure. This looks like a tank or bathing facility, now occurring below 40 meters of seawater, located near the western periphery of the town. It resembles the Great Bath found in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, where these structures were also occurred on the western side of the township. There are 2 divisions in the tank, which may represent separate enclosures for men and women, or for socially higher and lower categories of people. These are 2 openings probably for an inlet and exit of water, to keep the water in the tank fresh and clean. One can see prominent and well-made long linear basement of a major structure measuring 200 by 45 meters. It nestles on high ground with steps on the right corner approaching the structure. Inside the structure there are many square-shaped room-like features with fortifications surrounding it. This type of huge structure resembles the citadel found in the Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dholavira cities. These also occur at the western extremity on the high ground. Probably it was an administrative building supervising the entire civic activities of the township. Some pieces of fossilized human bones, natural teeth, and some fossilized animal bones were uncovered during sampling on the eastern side of the citadel. Sonar imaging picked up a major dilapidated structure measuring 190 by 85 meters with spaces separated by what looks like collapsed walls. In front of it, on the bottom, there are several basements of rectangular-shaped 2.5 to 3.5 by 6 meter structures resembling miner dwellings. It could be an ancient granary for the township, probably with dwelling places nearby for the workers. In the nearby areas, some fossilized food grains have been collected. In many of the Harappan sites, the granary is a regular feature. There is a buried settlement basement that measures 74 meters by 48 meters. It has irregular square, rectangular, and arch shapes. These indicate that there are still some constructed portions standing up partly. To the north of the structure, also, a few square and rectangular shaped basements are visible. A burial structural basement with the main structure measures 40 by 19 meters with wall-like dark features rising 2 to 3 meters above the seabed. A series of step-like features are also seen approaching the structure from the right side, and to one corner of the main structure, an 11 by 7 meter rectangular depression looking like another small tank or pond. A SubBottom profiler survey, instead of reflecting sound waves from the seabed like side-scan sonar, penetrates the seabed. The waves travel beneath the seabed in different formations in different speeds, and the instrument collects the reflection data over selected frequencies. It provides good depth information on geological features apart from delineating any suspected burial anthropogenic structures. The SubBottom profiler images below the 200 meter by 45 meter citadel-like structure shows features that appear to be the basement and foundations of that structure. The foundations have been dug down to 5 to 6 meters in the soil, over which broad column-like features had been constructed, probably to take the load off the huge structure above. Another SubBottom profiler image is below the buried settlement of a 74 by 48 meter structure. Here, man-made foundations, like columns, can be clearly seen emerging from below the seabed and occur as standout features. Here, the foundations have been dug up to 3 to 4 meters deep into the soil, and these types of planning and methods of construction prove the builders had a very good knowledge of civil and structural engineering. Broader and deeper foundations were provided for bigger and heavier structures, thinner and shallower foundations for comparatively smaller structures. Likewise, almost all the structures, including the dwelling sites, indicate a good amount of planning and design, taking into consideration the structural aspects. Deploying a high-resolution marine cesium vapor magnetometer, magnetic surveys were conducted. The survey was for observing magnetic signatures occurring as anomalies of subsurface magnetic bodies in the area. The instrument was capable of a delicate sensitive rate with values corrected for diurnal variation to remove the temporal variation in the magnetic field of the Earth. The corrected magnetic field value is a result of the marine magnetic components. Regional geological features are very deep-seated in origin and have depth persistence, whereas one should look for very shallow and near seabed anomalies that do not extend in depth. Several shallow, near-surface anomalies were picked up, ranging in depth from 1 meter below surface to as much as 50 meters. The deep-seated anomalies are below 400 meters from the seabed surface. The near-surface anomalies are covered by top sediments and are likely to be archaeological sites. From these surveys, a vast area has now acquired archaeological importance, enhancing the area beyond side-scan surveys, which reminds me that back in 1975-76, when I was digging in La Jolla, at Scripps they were inventing this technology which would allow radar and sonar to penetrate below the surface And then the CIA stepped in because they wanted to use it for their reasons. And I kind of just watched the whole thing from the side. But by now, half a century later, you can see that this technology has been perfected and is useful in for archaeological reasons. Now, obviously, this was an extensive civilization, the remains and ruins of which since been covered by shifting shoals, sand waves, and tectonism that are very common features in the Gulf of Cambay. Although a variety of objects and artifacts were collected in settlements, some persons expressed doubts whether these could have been transported by Paleo channel and may not be in situ. To clear such doubts, detailed geochemical analysis were carried out. 10 geological soil samples and 10 artifacts were chosen from the Gulf of Cambay area, and since trace elements like titanium, hafnium, thorium, and rare earth elements, REE, are immobile, they preserve their signatures without alteration and hence reflect primary petrogenic character. These 20 selected representative samples were analyzed using an ICP mass spectrometer. The rare earth element pattern normalized with shale supports the conclusion there is a one-to-one match between the archaeological material and the Cambay bed sediments. This is characterized by leaching of light rare earth elements and a prominent European anomaly. The plots of the materials show clustering of all samples in one place, indicating the samples are of the same host chemistry and are in situ, i.e., that is, that the archaeological material was not transported, but was made from locally available material only. To substantiate these findings, detailed sampling was undertaken. Since the sea condition was very rough and the water turbid and brown, sampling was conducted in areas where side scan images show excellent results, and the samples were collected by using a grab sampler, dredger, gravity core, and vibro core. Large numbers of samples were carefully collected, systematically numbered, and properly preserved. The artifacts collected included a variety of pottery pieces, Mesolithic stone tools, a few Paleolithic macro stone tools, beads made by semi-precious stones, brick pieces, hearth material, wattle and daub structure material, corals and perfectly holed stones, fossilized human remains, and human teeth. 3 potsherds are unfired and sun-dried clay of great antiquity. On the other side of the figure, a cross-like object and some figurines are seen. One shows the shape of a deer's head, and to the right a well-turned ornamental piece with a straight hole in the center. How the ancients were able to make them in stone needs yet to be determined. One can observe a fossilized jawbone or mandible with a natural tooth kept in front. Next to it is part of the carbonized wooden log. This was obtained from the top stratigraphic column at a depth of about 30 to 40 centimeters below the seabed, and it was set for dating. In the left corner there are rolled objects and long linear beads, which when strung together form a necklace. In the right-hand bottom of the figure, linear beads made of stone are there with holes in the middle. And now we come to a subject of special interest to me, which is the microlithic horizon. A series of microlithic tools, that is very small stone tools, were collected at various locations. Generally, microlithic tools are characteristic of the Mesolithic period and are found between Paleolithic and Neolithic Stone Age periods. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on microblades and microblade cores from the icebound Telegraph Creek, British Columbia localities along the Stikine River. Many other microtools were uncovered at that time by us, and this is an area of special interest to me. And I published, of course, on all of this stuff, but the characteristic features of such tools are that they are unlike the earliest Paleolithic tools, being much smaller. Most are between 1 and a few centimeters in length and are made of finely crafted semi-precious stones like obsidian. They also include quartz, jasper, flint, chalcedony, agate, corundum, and jadeite. The Indian sample collected consists of 248 such tools. Indian tools include a backed blade with a serrated edge, point and point-on flakes, lunates, scrapers, cores with negative chipping, and a boring tool. The tools have both geometric and non-geometric forms. Now, this Mesolithic period in western India revealed the existence of two cultural phases, namely an aceramic and ceramic phase. One evolves, the aceramic, of course, that is without ceramics, evolves into the other with ceramics. The later ceramic phase contained wattling clay remnants of house construction and the flooring of houses. Here, the hunting and gathering way of life was replaced by organized food production. Holed stones that appeared in the late Paleolithic became prominent in the Mesolithic. These holed stones were used as digging stick weights and as net sinkers in fishing. A sedentary form of living heralded the beginning of other associated cultural artifacts, like pottery, living in well-built houses like wattle and clay, of sun-dried and fired bricks. In short, we have the exact same pattern of broad spectrum, wild resource, hunting, gathering, fishing we have everywhere in the world as people moved from band and tribal agriculture and aquaculture to simple chieftain agriculture and aquaculture. Microlithic tools come in a variety of types. These include thumbnail scrapers to skin small animals, obliquely truncated fluted core made of red corundum, apart from borers and points. Usage of corundum is something unique, as it is the second hardest material, known after diamond, on the Mohs scale of hardness. The red and blue transparent varieties of corundum are the gemstones ruby and sapphire. So this is the first reported usage of corundum as a microlithic tool in India and maybe in the world. Other tools include a microlithic blade made of chert and quartz for cutting purposes, a microlithic side scraper, and a microlithic tool point with a serrated edge. Apart from these, pieces of hearth material have been collected. These were used for firing and heating, and hence are very good for dating purposes. At places, pieces of lightweight, hollow, circle-like materials were collected. Probably these may be slag pieces, cinder after extraction of metal, and the ancients might have the knowledge of some metallurgy. Pottery pieces of various types were collected. These include a broken bowl, coarse redware, pottery pieces embedded in mud walls, slow wheel-turned pottery pieces, pieces of jar lid, pottery piece with some cord impression, and a very ancient fragment of pottery, possibly among the oldest so far collected anywhere. And I conclude this particular lecture with what I like to call a tale of two cities. In the Gulf of Cambay, a variety of microlithic tools is clearly a typological continuation of late Paleolithic tools. The presence of highly evolved experimental pottery from 13,000 BP, combined with organized living, sedentary well-planned habitation, advanced sanitary and town planning activities in the southern metropolis, is one thing. This indicates that the Indus had developed toward urbanism from about 13,000 BP. There is evidence for fire control and the making of pottery from about 16,840 BP. Now, the southern metropolis so far has provided datable objects up to 8,500 BP. The well-developed northern metropolis has dates of civilization from about 7506 BP. Now, one can take into consideration the ideas given by Graham Hancock, who postulated that several cultures in the near coastal areas have been flooded and submerged by rising sea level caused by melting of ice caps subsequent to the last ice age. The inundation maps prepared by Dr. Glenn Milne of England's Durham University show that the Gulf of Cambay area prior to 7,600 BP was mostly land. After 6,900 BP, it is mostly submerged. This type of rise in sea level is supported by the work of Dr. P.K. Banerjee on the southeast coast of India and the work of Sahidul Islam and Tuli in the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh, and also that of Sen and Banerjee's work near Calcutta. The area is highly prone to severe seismicity. In the past 500 years, several earthquakes have shaken the area, including the major in excess of 8 magnitude Richter scale event on the 26th of January 2001. But we know that on the 16th of January 1819, there was another 8.3 magnitude event that devastated nearby areas, and these quakes have caused a lot of subsidence at some places and elevation at other places. In the Gulf of Cambay itself, various surveys have picked up fault zones and earthquake-affected areas with throws of up to as much as 30 meters in elevation or depression. A major rift formed the Gulf of Cambay. To understand the phenomenon and paleoseismic activity, NIOT commissioned Dr. Rajendram of CESS Trivandrum to carry out paleoseismic studies in the area surrounding the Gulf of Cambay. And his work identified paleoseismic events and dated them by the OSL technique and the radiometric dating of nearby organic material. It has given excellent evidence to support the findings, and he was able to detect the presence of sand-blown layers caused by old earthquakes as well as new ones. His work in peripheral land areas of the Gulf of Cambay, like Katana, Lotul, and Moti Bar, gave evidence of major earthquakes in the Cambay area in the following periods. First in 2780, plus or minus 150 years BP. The second in 3983, plus or minus 150 BP. And finally at 77,540, plus or minus 130 BP. So herein lies the evidence of the end of the Gulf of Cambay civilization. In the old major event, about 7,600 or nearby, or nearly about the southern metropolis appear to have been thrown down by faulting, and the nearby sea appears to have inundated it. Because of this, its people appear to have proceeded north to an elevation higher than the sea level and established the second or northern metropolis. In turn, the new city was affected by faulting from earthquakes around 4000 BP and was destroyed altogether by 2780 plus or minus 150 BP event, and then the sea transgressed the area, completely submerging it. It is worthwhile pointing out three important facts. The folk songs in local Kutchi dialogue mention about 4 major towns of ancient past. 3 of these have been identified as Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Dholavira. Obviously, the 4th one, and the biggest of them all, and the oldest, is the Gulf of Cambay metropolis we have been discussing. Now we turn to Dwarka, D-W-A-R-K-A. Other investigators describe a small-scale stone ruins near the Gulf of Kutch. That would be at the present-day town of Dwarka, where we have the remains of the ancient, fabled city of Dwarka. Dwarka is described as the abode of Lord Krishna, of Mahabharata fame. Main disciple in the Mahabharata epic vividly describes this. The city is said to have been completely transgressed by the sea. The puzzling aspect, which is incoherent, is the location of the city of Dwarka. The temple we see today is hardly 900 years old, so the area all around is dry, devoid of vegetation, and with brackish water. Krishna is supposed to have maintained a huge army of men, animals like elephants and horses, but there are no trees or foliage or fresh water for a big army. Therefore, it strikes a discordant note about the location. But the submerged metropolis of the Gulf of Cambay has strong, powerful flowing rivers, lots of trees and foliage, and huge township of truly ancient times. So probably the metropolis in the Gulf of Cambay is the Dwarka city of Mahabharata fame. Another thing to consider is what happened when the first and second metropolis got submerged. It is interesting to note that there are about 500 Harappan and pre-Harappan settlements in Gujarat, of which about 258 are on the peripheral area of the Gulf of Cambay. All of them are younger than the Gulf of Cambay southern metropolis. To the immediate west of the Gulf of Cambay on the Saurashtra coast is the well-known pre-Harappan and Harappan archaeological site of Padri, P-A-D-R-I. It has been established by the Deccan College researchers that the river Chatranji that is now flowing east into the Gulf of Cambay originally flowed west, but was tilted toward the east by large-scale structural changes. By connecting it to the southern Paleo channel and extending it, we see that it goes to Prabhaspatan in the Arabian Sea. Prabhaspatan is a well-known pre-Harappan archaeological site mentioned in the Mahabharata epic. To the east, the Paleo Channel is seen to be an extension of the present-day River Tapai. Obviously, the River Tapai was flowing right up to Prabhaspatan on the Arabian Sea before the drifting and formation of the Gulf of Cambay. And it now falls into the Gulf of Cambay instead of the Arabian Sea. These ancients, after the catastrophe and submergence in the Gulf of Cambay, appear to have spread out all over Gujarat, then to the surrounding areas to establish a continuing and evolving civilization of Harappan type. It is clear that the prehistoric advanced theocratic chiefdoms matured and developed in the present-day Gulf of Cambay as the forerunners and models of the subsequent slave-based Harappan kingdom that we know from the historic record. These twin prehistoric metropoli of Cambay lasted from about 13,000 BP for 10,000 years, that is, to about 3,000 BP. This makes India the most ancient and largest city-building slave-stage civilization in Asia, and thus the entire world, some 7,500 years older than the oldest Mesopotamian city civilizations, and slightly earlier than China's ATC early kingdoms. And that brings us to a conclusion of this morning's lecture. I'm going to move on to Pakistan in our next lecture, and then we're going to get to the point where we go into the detailed discussion of the more advanced archaeological sites in South Asia. And South Asia in this discussion will include Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And assuming I'm still around, after that we'll do Southwest Asia and Arabia.